What are you doing? I don't see you playing by yourself that often. Okay, well, this is surely a very familiar place for me. The Sea of Fragments. That, or I may have accidentally resumed like a previous adventure, and this isn't the current one. It's like that one episode from Seinfeld. I'm like Kramer, and I enter the apartment, and everything is completely changed, and I'm like, oh man, I'm on the wrong floor again. What? All you could do before was to nod to my questions. Since when do you have your own will? I'm glad. I finally have a sister or brother. Whichever you are. I used to be an existence of nothingness, just like you. But one day, I began to have my own identity, my own thoughts, and eventually, my own body. Okay, well, you know, if Higurashi were my first Ryukishi adventure and not Yumineko, I wouldn't know what the fuck is going on right over here, but given that I read the other one first, my first instinct would tell me that this is Ben Castell talking to Rika. So it's not a surprise to see you in a possession of your own will. Welcome to this vast yet tiny world, my sister. Hold on a second. I don't see you playing by yourself that often. All you could do before was to nod to my questions. So it's not a surprise to see you in possession of your own will. See you in possession of your own will? You might be my brother, but let me call you my sister until I know for sure. Okay, I don't get it. This is an endless, eternal, and infinite world, but that doesn't mean it's boundlessly vast. I suppose you could describe it like a ring with a small diameter. While the ring is an eternal, endlessly looping world, that doesn't mean it contains infinite space. Yes, in short, this world is eternally sealed. The future is supposed to be an infinite weave of countless choices, yet for whatever reason, our world always ends in death. If I were to compare it to something, perhaps a maze of fate would be appropriate. Also, speaking of this whole thing with worlds that always end in death, I remember back in chapter 6 when Rika / Ben Castell visited Rena at the construction site. I was calculating like the years and such and how many timelines Rika had, and I said minimum like 7 days maybe to at least go through the Watanagashi festival and before and after. Well, I did forget that apparently like this must have been going for a long time, for years, because even Rika as a baby back in 1978 displayed such powers when she met Takasaka. So clearly, apparently the timelines for Rika are very long. At the very least from 1978 till 1983. God knows how long. Maybe when she dies, the loop starts when she's given birth. We don't know yet, so I at least meant to try to make that correction there. Looping through the same moments forever steadily grows harder and more dejecting, eventually producing something like me. Then as that draws further on, even one like you is born, and eventually this world may be filled with your sisters too. After that, we'll build a colony inside of it, and once we lose our interest in this maze, Rika Furude will disappear from this world. It looks like you still cling to this narrow world, Rika, though I lost interest long ago, which is why I'm truly glad you were born for me to talk to. So what are you doing? Are you collecting fragments of memory? There's only 5 or 6 of them right now. Must still be fun for you though. There used to be more fragments long ago, but one by one they disappeared into the darkness. Now, these are the only ones that remain clear. Oh, that's not how you're supposed to use it. See? Try and hold it up to the light. All that is the life of Rika Furude and its end. Sheesh. Also, we are starting chapter 7 and we're delving into this. I guess now this is turning supernatural as well. No, that one is... Oh, I remember that one. That's the world when Keiichi was cursed. Those fragments are like books to me, so I called that one the Onikakushi chapter. Do you remember what happened in that one? Good. That makes things easier. In Onikakushi, Keiichi Maebara was consumed by the darkness. He couldn't accept the kind words his friends offered him, and eventually beat them to death, not knowing of their kindness. We were all killed after that anyway. All killed. Okay, so apparently, I guess if we were to go with this, even Rika and Satoko were murdered like after that. Which makes me think of the disaster, so yeah. Because at some point in the past, I was questioning myself, okay, in which timeline did the disaster happen and in which timeline didn't? Because I said, chapter 3 and 5. And I was questioning myself if chapter 1 happened, but no. In conclusion, we can definitely say that all chapters ended in the same way, it seems. Even if we didn't get to see it. That had nothing to do with his story, though. That fragment is the Watanagashi chapter. Shion Sonzaki was cursed in that one. She killed many people out of revenge for her boyfriend's disappearance, as he went missing in 1982. Rika worked so hard, but she was captured at the end, and she was tortured to death. That's why she chose to commit suicide in the Miyakashi chapter, because things were going to turn out the same way. Okay. Well, there's a difference between chapter 2 and 5 in that sense, because I actually didn't think about it. Because, okay, I know that in chapter 2 and 5, Rika dies because of Shion. But the difference is that in chapter 2, she was captured and she was tortured to death. In Miyakashi, she didn't let Shion do that to her. I see. That fragment over there is called the Tatarigoroshi chapter. Satoko's uncle came back and locked her up inside her house. That was the worst world of all. There was nothing Rika was able to do in that world. Whenever Satoko's uncle comes back, Rika usually just gives up on that world. That is true, if I'm to think about it, because let me think of this. Okay, so chapter 2 and 5, like, we know, like, what she does. Chapter 6, we've seen the events of chapter 6. She has done plenty. Chapter 1? Admittedly, she hasn't done that much in that, but she definitely talked to Keiichi, that's for sure. So, chapter 3... yeah, she may be right. We didn't really get to see that much of Rika in chapter 3 as far as I remember. Fortunately, Satoko's uncle doesn't come back that frequently. That one is called the Tsumihoroboshi chapter. Rika was there until just a moment ago. Urena Ryugi was possessed in that world. It was pretty exciting to see her take over the whole school. possessed. It surprised me to learn that Keiichi Maebara had a memory of the other worlds, just like we do. It was pretty amazing. But then again, most of us have some kind of memory like that. Okay, well, can you tell us why Keiichi managed to display that kind of power? We all have an imaginary world within us. Some idea what would have happened if you did things differently. It's like the strange feeling you get when you do something for the first time, but it feels like you've done it before. Everyone has a memory of an imaginary world in their mind, but the memory is not always that clear. Huh. An imaginary world in their mind. It's not surprising, really. You are special enough to be able to see those fragments of memory. It's probably very difficult for you to understand how special you really are. You were born into a world where it's a natural thing for you to see these fragments. I was originally born in the normal world. I didn't know until recently that I could collect these fragments of memory. Wait, hold on a second, hold on. There's a lot to unpack here. So, imaginary world in their mind. Okay, so up until this point, I was going with the more sci-fi kind of aspect to it. Like, you know, different timelines converging into one another when you do something completely different. You know, think of like Back to the Future or whatever. But I guess, like, if I'm to think of the imaginary world in their mind, is this the equivalent of saying that, okay, your mind creates this scenario, and thus it creates like a completely different world that is a bit imaginary. It has never happened per se in timelines, but it is something that your mind creates. So, would you say that every subsequent chapter that happens, like say chapter 7, the previous 6 chapters would be considered imaginary worlds? Because in chapter 6, you are imagining these worlds happening. Even though previously they did not happen. Your mind creates these imaginary worlds as if they actually did happen. And in turn, they happened. Your mind is what creates these worlds, but not like your actions in time. So in that sense, this current timeline, chapter 7, is the real timeline, and the previous were imaginary timelines, imaginary worlds, until the next chapter, chapter 8, will be the new real timeline, and this chapter 7 timeline, which originally was the real timeline, is gonna become the imaginary world? I don't know, maybe I'm just spewing bullcrap out over here, but okay. The second one that I want to talk about is, you were born into a world where it's a natural thing for you to see these fragments. I was originally born in a normal world. I didn't know until recently that I could collect these fragments of memory. Well, okay, previously it said that they were definitely talking to Rika, that's for sure. They said their name. It looks like you still cling to this narrow road, Rika, though I lost interest long ago. And yet you're saying that Rika was born? You were born into a world where it's a natural thing for you to see these fragments. I was originally born in a normal world. Because I'm thinking that Bercastel is born in this natural place of fragments. So it's kind of confusing to say that Bercastel is born in a normal world. Would it mean that this is Oyashiro? I'm not sure. It could be that Oyashiro is talking to Rika here. We don't know. And they were born in a normal world too. You grabbed those fragments just because you could. but I didn't know how to do that for a long time. I'm sorry. I'm sure you're not interested in hearing my story. No. Continue. Huh? What's wrong? What are you curious about? Oh? You're curious as to why so many different incidents occur in the same world? It's very interesting, isn't it? Why do you think that's the case? Let's think about it together. Thinking is the first step towards playing a game. The main character among Rika's group of friends is Keiichi Maebara. In Onikakushi, he was possessed by suspicion and killed Rena Ryugyu and Myon Sonzaki. Possessed by suspicion. If that was an inevitable event, he would be killing them in every world. In other words, what Keiichi Maebara did in Onikakushi was not inevitable. Possessed by suspicion. You know, I did say in chapter 6 that one of the, some of the core themes of this story is friendship and, trust and mistrust and all that. And when it comes to the endings, whatever it may be, the government, the aliens and such, it always ends in bad endings and all that, because of mistrust. I guess, spiritually speaking, in a meta sense, or spiritually speaking, what possesses these kids, it's not aliens or the government or parasites or something, but spiritually speaking, it'll be the physical manifestation of these core themes: suspicion, mistrust. I don't know, I guess in similar fashion to Kingdom Hearts? It has been a little bit since I played / have watched Kingdom Hearts and such, but it kind of reminds me of that. The core thing with, the nothingness and... what was it called? I don't remember, but either way. Indeed, the only thing that's inevitable is Keiichi Maebara's role. If Keiichi Maebara was someone with a naturally suspicious heart, he would take the same actions in every world. But that didn't happen. Heartless. There you go. That's what I was looking for. Heartless. It's true that Keiichi Maebara is both passionate and easily convinced of anything, but it's rare for him to exhibit the kind of rage displayed in Onikakushi. In other words, even though something might seem inevitable in one world, that may not be the case if you compare it to a different one. True, if something really is inevitable, it will happen for sure in every life. That's what true inevitability is like. It's very important that you know that. So it's not really inevitable. When you compare the different worlds, what's coming among all of them is the truth. Understand? Like I said, what seems inevitable in one life could just be a random event in another. The club activities that Myon Sonzaki suggests are a good example. If Myon Sonzaki had a strong inclination toward playing certain games, you'd be playing them in every world. But in reality, you participate in different activities in most of them. That means that the games we play in the club are randomly decided by Myon Sonzaki. We know that now because we've been through many different lives. Those who only live in one world can't see if the event in question is inevitable or random. True enough, there have been some details that are shared between one and another. Obviously the Watanagashi, but I'm talking about club activities, for example. Obviously we don't go through the same club activities in every single chapter because story-wise, that can get a bit stagnant and boring. I guess if I'm to offer an example, it would be Zero Escape, which I find it a good series and all that, but that's kind of an example of a story where we do go through the same kind of beats, we have to. But here, things have been very, very different each time. Because I also assumed that, well, some events did happen, like the club activities do happen, it's just that we don't get to see them every single time. For example, you would be inclined to say that the water gun fight happened in like the other chapters as well, but not really. Like, in conclusion, these... I guess it is time to say that we shouldn't be seeing these as timelines in similar fashion to like the sci-fi explanation, but the Sea of Fragments. These are timelines, but they are built completely different. Those who only live once can't predict what's going on in Mio Sonzaki's mind, but we can. Although the activities are random, Mio Sonzaki calls us together for the club meeting almost every day in every life. Now, if these are like timelines in similar fashion to sci-fi explanations and such, what would be their origins? In Yumineko, they do have an origin, but I'm not gonna talk about that because I don't want to bring Yumineko into this. But the episodes, they have an origin in something specific. They are created from something, and I'm not gonna talk about that. Here, I don't know. Like, where do these fragments come from? Like, these are timelines, but very specially made, so it kind of makes you think, like, what are these chapters that we're going through? In a meta sense, I guess. I can see that Mio Sonzaki holds a strong will towards having the club meeting. Mio Sonzaki always wants to play with the other club members, but she doesn't know what to play. See? We can read Mio Sonzaki's mind just by simply examining these fragments. With this alone, we can see part of who Mio Sonzaki really is. I mean, in the sense that no matter what the game, it doesn't matter what game, as long as she plays with the club members and all that. She loves her friends, so it doesn't really matter which game and all that. In the end, as long as she spends time with her friends. Like, it's not the games that are very important. Let me talk a bit more about Keiichi Maebara. For those who only live once, the Rodo no Nikakushi chapter is nothing but a story where Keiichi suffered mysterious hallucinations and beat his friends to death. For them, there's nothing beyond that fact. We, however, can compare different fragments and find out something they could never see. As a result, we know that the murder of his friends was not inevitable. That is true. I told you that just earlier. In fact, while there are about 5 or 6 pieces in front of you, he only kills his friends in one of them. That means we can roughly conclude that the possibility Keiichi Maebara triggers the tragedy is less than 20%, and is almost a fluke. This means that amongst the countless roads, Keiichi Maebara causing the tragedy is an unimportant factor. You know, I was saying something similar to that in the previous chapter near the end, except I was thinking about the disaster and all that, because... And I was bringing in the context of the brainwashing theory that Akasaka was talking about. It's just that if I were to think that, okay, the government is brainwashing the kids into doing these events, it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, because it always ends in the disaster. In one chapter, Keiichi murders, in another chapter, Rena murders. The disaster is still gonna happen no matter what, independently of these actions, so... These events don't really serve that much in the grand scheme of things, except to tell us a lot of things about their characters. These are very important moments for their characters, more than the disaster, like the plot that is happening with the deadly virus. Now, can you find the common thread to be drawn from here? The disaster? You found it already. Rika? No wonder you were born in this world. you're quick to learn the knack for playing with building blocks. I didn't figure that out for a while. I was born in a normal world, so I could only see things from a single world's perspective. I was too obsessed with the fact that Keiichi Maebara caused the tragedy, so I had trouble finding it. Right, that's exactly right. You see it? The Onikakushi, Watanagashi, Miyakashi, and Sumihoroboshi chapters all have something in common. Someone in the group becomes violent because of dark and paranoid thoughts. Okay, that too. In each world, either Keiichi Maebara, Shion Sonzaki, or Ren Ariakey became violent as their delusions grew stronger. Keiichi Maebara, Shion Sonzaki, and Ren Ariakey are all my close friends, but they're all born and raised differently. The only common factor is that they all live in Hinamizawa. I just said it not too long ago though. When we peer through these fragments of multiple worlds, the constant phenomena become our facts, and the chance phenomena hold little meaning. In other words, the unrelated individual culprits are not all that important. To go further, the violence of their crimes also bears no meaning. Keiichi Maebara beat his friends to death. Shion Sonzaki killed the central people of the three families, and Ren Ariakey took over the school and killed Teppei and Rina. They're all different. There's nothing in common there. In fact, the very, very important truth is that while the culprit and crimes are decided at random, their process of growing paranoid until they resort to violence is always constant. True. Mistrust. The suspect changes every time, but the process does not. After comparing the different worlds, this is the truth I found. This is one truth that is common to all the worlds of Hinamizawa. The rule is that a random person becomes violent under the influence of paranoid thoughts. This is Rule X. Keiichi Maebara, Shion Sonzaki, and Ren Ariakey, pieces with no particular connection, have the potential to succumb to that rule with random probability. I don't know what the probability is that those pieces will be snared by that rule. Perhaps there's some rule to that too. Is it because these three are all close in age? Sure enough. So far, there is also the pattern that they're just kids. They're just such young kids. Or is it because they all live in Hinamizawa? Well, we're not detectives or police officers. This is not something that a small girl like us, Rika Fuure, can easily figure out. At least we know now that there's a mysterious rule in the world of Hinamizawa. People who only live in one world have no way of knowing that. I mean, like if I am to think of it outside the box, could be like a bit of a chance right over here. Although, not really, because you could say that, oh, somewhere in the world outside of Hinamizawa, like before the disaster happens, some other person dies because of some other person that is filled with rage and paranoia. That has nothing to do with Hinamizawa. It's just that in the context of Hinamizawa and Higurashi and all that, every chapter ends with the disaster and somebody unrelated to the disaster killing someone else in Hinamizawa. Always. There's always gonna be murder in these chapters, in these fragments, no matter what. I'm proud of myself for figuring that out. I guess for you it's not particularly surprising though. Huh? What did you say? That's right. If something is common among all worlds, that means it's fated to happen. Some events quickly come to mind, don't they? Right. Jiro Tomitake and Mio Takano are always killed in those worlds. Jiro Tomitake? Who the fuck is this? This is the first time I'm seeing this guy. On top of that, they are murdered in exactly the same way in every world. Oh, it's the guy that always dies in like every chapter. We've heard of him like plenty of times. In other words, unlike our previous rule with its variability, their murders are thoroughly planned out by someone with a strong will. So, that does not fit with the mysterious, vague Rule X that leads a random individual to violence. After all, they are always murdered, regardless of who falls to Rule X. Then I guess we could call it like a Rule Y? Like, no matter what, the Rule Y would be that Jiro Tomitake dies, Miyotakano, quote-unquote, dies, and the disaster happens. In fact, I'm gonna say that Rule Y leads to Rule Z. Rule Y, which is their deaths, leads to Rule Z, the disaster. Therefore, there's another rule to these rules. A rule that says Jiro Tomitake, yeah, exactly, and Miyotakana will get killed on the night of Anagashi. Let's call it Rule Y. Don't you see how funny this is? Jiro Tomitake and Miyotakano are killed in every world, right? Every time, the character who gets cursed always thinks that their deaths have something to do with the danger that's awaiting them. The fact that someone turns violent, Rule X, and Jiro Tomitake and Miyotakano's deaths, Rule Y, are supposed to be two independent rules. But they all tend to link them together. True enough, they are definitely independent, it's just that Rule Y definitely influences Rule X in increasing the paranoia that enforces Rule X, like enforces like the mistrust. Of course, one could say that's how they become ensnared in the spell of paranoia, leading them to violence to begin with. Exactly. But we think, in their paranoia, that they notice someone is trying to lead them to link those rules together. I'd argue to say that it's Miyotakano. Yes, whoever the piece leading them is, they are the one making the stage called Hinamizawa very complicated. You should have noticed at least two suspicious people. Do you know who I'm talking about? That's right. I'm referring to Kurao Oishi and Miyotakano. Oishi? When you compare our previous fragments, the role of the piece known as Kurao Oishi becomes clear. I mean, admittedly, I don't believe it, but you look at Oishi, he has definitely influenced, like, every single chapter, no doubt. He's a detective who is retiring this year, and he's in a hurry to solve the mystery of the series of deaths in Hinamizawa. After he retires, he have to move away from the village. That's why he's so desperate to solve this case, before he has to leave Hinamizawa. Why is he so obsessed with the serial murders in Hinamizawa? It's because of the death of his friend in 1979. It's because of the first murder involving the manager of the construction site. The victim was Oishi's close friend. You will see that if you look at the Himatsubushi chapter. Himatsubushi? Oishi was there when the Dan conflict was at its peak. I am. Chapter 4 was called Himatsubushi. He saw how the Sonozaki family took control of the Onigafuchi Guardians. And he believed that the Sonozaki... Wait. Onigafuchi. Okay, there you go. Onigafuchi Guardians. Not the Okonogi Gardeners. And he believed that the Sonozaki family was pulling the strings behind the whole incident. That's why he always suspected that the Sonozaki family was behind the series of mysterious deaths, regardless of the evidence or lack thereof. His personal biased belief, combined with his credibility as a police detective, affected the pitiable victims of persecution complexes in each world. As a result, the pitiful victims of Rule X come to accept the Sonozaki family as the identity of the unknown force their paranoia seeks. Sure enough, like, in similar fashion to Miyotakano, who just keeps spooking the kids and giving them scrapbooks and all that, Oishi has definitely told, for example, Keiichi about Rena's past, or vice versa, which kinda adds fuel to the fire. Shion Sonozaki's case was the most conspicuous one in that matter. So yes, if this piece Oishi didn't intervene, then perhaps the victims of Rule 8X would never resorted to such violence. So the role his piece plays is to indirectly cause the tragedy. I don't know who named him this, but Oyashiro-sama's servant is the perfect nickname for Oishi. The other suspicious person is Mio Takano. One would assume the only role of her piece is to amuse herself with research into Onigafuchi's dreadful history, and to take pleasure in scaring others with those tales. However, just like Oishi, she also gives them the idea that the Sonozaki family is behind all the mysterious incidents that happen in the village. She interfered the most with Rena Ryugu. For Mio Takano, Rena Ryugu was the perfect prey, grasping at straws to try and identify the force she suspected. Ironically, however, Mio Takano always ends up getting killed at the end. If she had survived and seen Rena take over the school, she would have laughed long and loud. Now, have you realized that these two pieces and the roles they fulfill have their own rule too? They talk about the Sonozaki family, and the listeners always believe them. This is Rule Z. And what a humorous rule it is. You should already have an answer to this mystery in your fragments on hand. The fact is that the Sonozaki family always acts as if they are responsible, no matter if they are or not. They always pretend to be the villains in order to make sure that people continue to fear them. Yeah. As a result, the villagers have believed that the Sonozaki family has been pulling the strings ever since the damn conflict ended. Kurado Oishi and Mio Takano were simply fooled by that rule. I don't know about Mio Takano though. Actually, the whole village is fooled by it. Still, the more I think about it, the stranger this year's mysterious deaths in Hinamizawa seems to me. Do you know why? Nearly all the fragments of memories we have here are from 1983. So I have no idea about the incidents from 1980 to 1982. But it's likely that interpreting these murders as serial is simply a result of falling victim to Rule Z, believing that the Sonozaki family is pulling the strings behind everything. True enough, at some point I did think that maybe these murders are individually done. Each had their own culprits. In short, they may be trying to conflate those multiple crimes, which each happened for different reasons, into one big case. Well, I have no way of discerning the truth from the fragments here. Still, perhaps something lies in one of them. Each case was supposed to have been solved individually after all. We don't know if that theory is sound or irrational, but it might surprisingly be an element we can't ignore. That reminds me, Shion said something intriguing in the Miyakashi chapter. That curse system she came up with. Do you remember that? Yeah, I remember it plenty. Her theory was that the villagers believe that they are allowed to kill an enemy of the village on the night of Wanaragashi, in the name of Oyashiro-sama's curse, and that the foundation of murder is allowed on that night alone is the true identity of the curse. Since most of the fragments here are from 1983, there's nothing to back the validity of Shion's theory, but there are still interesting things about it. In other words, her theory is that the suspect is not the one who's committing the crime. It's the environment that's causing the murder. People in a single world tend to analyze the criminal's life to determine the process that led them to the crime, but her idea is different. the real crime is committed not by the criminals, but by the environment. In other words, it may only be happenstance that robber A committed a crime, and the environment of poverty may have created robber B instead, or perhaps even robber C. A may not even be a criminal in another world. Therefore, the real criminal is not A, but the environment that creates A, B, or C. I guess it kind of makes you think of Rule X. And well, while people in a single world may be able to reach such an idea, the widespread desire to place blame commonly causes A to be lynched by society, while the environment that gave rise to A goes ignored. Did I confuse you? I'm sorry. Perhaps that example is actually harder to understand for you. It's easy for me to see it like that because I'm from the normal world. Let me make it simple for you. The culprit behind the tragedy in many worlds isn't individuals like Keiichi Maebara or Shion Sonzaki, but the environment. So Rule X is the true culprit at fault. You're earning good marks if you can grasp that, even if you don't know the identity of Rule X. And if you can grasp the 3 rules governing the stage called Hinamizawa, rules X, Y, and Z, then you're earning very good marks. So as long as you understand those rules, then even if this is your first experienced world, you should easily find the truth without distraction. See? Isn't it fun? Nearly 3 simple rules are interacting on this stage, creating a kaleidoscope of different worlds. This is probably a very unusual case. In other locations, you shouldn't be able to see such extreme variation, even after looping through several worlds. And it keeps me entertained just staying here and watching these worlds revolve. Okay. As usual, I'm gonna have to do some volume testing for these first parts. Like the settings, they're good. I'd say that these are good. It's just like the overall volume should be balanced, because I also have like these new earphones plugged into the laptop, and apparently these are, well, they are actually the same as the last ones that I had. It's just that these are bringing in a lot more than before. I don't know how to explain this, but whatever. The point is, like, these are gonna be like the first parts where I'm gonna have to balance things out correctly. Anyway, there's one more fact we can understand from these fragments of worlds. And this is the biggest problem we Rika Furudes are facing. The fact that Rika Furude always dies each time. It's as if June 1983 is a dead end for her. Worse, there's no randomness to it. It's guaranteed to happen. In other words, it's the same pattern as the deaths of Jiro Tomitake and Mio Takano. It's following the exact same rule. Rule Y. Tomitake, Jiro, and Takano Mio are always murdered on the night of Watanagashi. Furude Rika's date of death is not always the same, but she's always dead by the middle of June. Jiro, Tomitake, and Mio Takano are probably attacked on their way home, so that's why it always happens on the same night. But for Rika Furude, it's different. She takes different actions in every world, and her lifestyle is very unpredictable. For that reason, the day of her death is not always the same. Also, to correct myself, because it's not confirmed until this point, but it's not as if the disaster happens like every single time. I did say that, but no. It's Rika's death that happens every single time, but the disaster doesn't always happen. It depends on Rika's death and how it's handled. I theorized about that before. However, she always dies in June, because a similar powerful conviction vows to kill her too. So can we assume that the same rule Y killing them is also the rule behind her death? Is the same person killing all three of them? I don't know if it's the same person, but it's highly likely the same rule is at work. Is it the same person or the same organization? Is it the same views, the same goals? Rika's most important goal is to escape her deadly fate. But it doesn't mean that she just wants to leave the village and survive. She wants to live happily in the village. All of her friends must also be happy too. That's Rika's happy future. The ideal future she hopes for. It's tragic that we can't realize such a simple desire no matter how many times we repeat this. Though, it's a tragedy we are only able to perceive because we're beings capable of comparing the fragments from different worlds. By the way, I have some interesting information. While Rika is almost always killed by Rule Y, have you noticed that she's killed by Rule X in some worlds? Well, in Shion's case, yes. Right. It happened in the Watanagashi and the Miyakashi chapters. Yeah. Rika Furude committed suicide. But you can say she was more or less killed by Rule X via Shion Sonzaki in those worlds. So, I guess if we were to create like a formula, Rika's death influenced by Rule X means does not equal the disaster. But on the flip side, Rika's death not influenced by Rule X equals disaster. In other words, this is a blunder of Rule Y. Rule Y is trying to kill Rika with a strong desire to achieve some aim. But she was killed before that, as a result of the unrelated Rule X. That might have caused them to show some disturbance. Oh, okay. So you're thinking the same way as I'm thinking. That, okay, Rika died in those chapters, but it may not be in accordance to someone's goal or something. That it was done completely different and it ruined their plan. As I said in like the investigation parts. So that would mean that Rika's death, influenced by Rule X, equals no disaster, but Rika's death influenced by Rule Y equals disaster. Okay. And when I think of Rule Y, well, actually, I don't even know why it says a blunder for Rule Y. Why is it a blunder for Rule Y? Because even in those chapters, when Rika dies because of Rule X by Shion, Tomitake and Takano still die in the same way. It's more so than I'm thinking of Takano herself. That because I don't know, like basically because of Takano's plan, whatever it is, that Rika died because of Rule X, that it didn't in accordance to her plan. I don't know. If Rule Y's objective is simply to bury Rika, then that's not a problem. But if they have some objective beyond that, then that might show up as some other phenomenon. Perhaps the Watanagashi and Miyakashi chapters have something in common. Something that doesn't happen in other worlds. I don't know. Unfortunately, we are Rika Furude, so we don't know what happens after Rika is dead. Or, by any chance, do you know what happened? Since I'm Rika Furude, I only know of events during Rika's life. You, on the other hand, are a special existence who was born in a superior world. Is there anything that happened in the Watanagashi and Miyakashi chapters that happened in all the other worlds after Rika's death? Wait. So Rika doesn't know about the events after her death, about the disaster. Huh. You know, thinking back, it makes sense. You begin your timeline, you end your timeline, you don't get to see what's after your timeline. We get to see it because we are the readers, but from Rika's perspective, she couldn't. If you know anything, then that must be another truth behind Rule Y. Although, like, I have been theorizing that Rika definitely knows because of the syringe. If she has that syringe with her, which I theorize that she got it from the clinic, that must mean that Rika definitely knows of some conspiracy behind it. Some conspiracy that would lead to the disaster. That's why I was thinking that she would know as well. That she would know everything, but apparently she doesn't, despite the fact that she has the syringe with her. Well, it is very much possible that she would learn of the conspiracy of, like, parasites slash deadly viruses taking control over Hinamizawa. Hell, she might know that the government or secret organization is taking over Hinamizawa, but she never knew about the contingency plan. I say it's contingency plan, that if, like, the result of all this. She doesn't know about that. She doesn't know about the disaster. And the memories I have here are all mainly about the chaos brought about by Rika's friends. That is, Rule X. But its foundation, Rule Z, and the obvious hostility common among all worlds, Rule Y, are what I believe to be the true rules governing the stage. If so, then Rika's path is a thorny one. She needs to fight Rule Y in order to survive. Yes, let's focus on that. Unless she defeats it, she has no future past June 1983. I guess you could say that Rika's mistake up until this point that she has been fighting like Rule X, because Rule X was very much close to her. The friends that she has made, like, doing all these incidents, she tried to find a solution to that, but instead she should have focused on Rule Y, on a completely separate angle, which, in retrospect, you wouldn't think that it has anything to do with her friends. It's not as if Takano or Tomitaka are really that related to the kids to begin with, so I can understand if Rika decided to just completely ignore Takano and Tomitaka's deaths. Although, again, the syringe kinda contradicts that. So it does make me feel as if Rika would know that there is some importance to Tomitaka and Takano's deaths, to the point where she would include those deaths in trying to solve this thing. But I don't know. Like, what Ben Castell right over here is telling us, assuming that this is Ben Castell, is that Rika apparently up until this point has only focused on Rule X, and that's all that she has known, and that she never heard of the disaster. I don't know. I honestly don't know about that one. And to win her own happiness, she must also beat Rule X to win her friend's safety. So as long as that's undefeated, one of Rika's precious friends may be led to tragedy. If that happens, then even should Rika survive, she wouldn't have the happy future she hopes for. She also may have to defeat Rule Z, just as Sonozaki Shion faced it in Miyakashi. So as long as Rule Z remains, then even if she escapes 1983, it's possible another tragedy may lie waiting in 1984. That's something that I was theorizing before, that okay, Rika's death would lead to the disaster, and it may be possible that Rika's death, done in the wrong way, would have fucked up Takano's plan, and thus the disaster did not happen in, say, Chapter 2 and Chapter 5. We did not get to see that, like the disaster happened. So it can very well be possible that Takano, who has faked her death, may be thinking, okay, clearly Rika has died in a way that I did not expect. I did not want Rika to die that way. I wanted her to die in a specific way. So, well, better luck next time in 1984. I was thinking that even if the disaster did not happen in 1983, it could still happen like later. Hell, Keiichi died in the future of 1983 in Chapter 5 for reasons we don't know, and I assumed it was Takano who is still out there. It's extremely likely that Rule Z is the breeding ground of Rule X. Hinamizawa's fundamental belief that the Sonozaki family is behind everything, and the custom that anything can be misconstrued as a curse, may indirectly be the root of all evil here. People are not surprised to see somebody die on the night of Wadanagashi. That type of thinking is keeping the curse alive in Hinamizawa, where it causes even more tragedy. It's Rule Z reinforcing itself. So Rule Z is definitely helping Rule Y. Rule X, Y, and Z. There are 3 rules that hunt Rika down in Eternal June of 1983. They're all tough obstacles. We didn't even figure out these 3 common rules until recently. Were you aware of them? If you were, I'll give you straight A's. I've tried so hard in the past to break these rules, but I was never successful. However, a miracle happened in the Tsumihoroboshi chapter. Yeah! Rule X was basically broken in that Keiichi Maebara was able to recognize a small fragment from another world by chance, and he beat Rule X. In the end, Rika was still killed that night by Rule Y though. But still, one rule was defeated. Like, whoever's talking over here, it keeps saying that Rika was still killed by Rule Y. Are they actually thinking the same way as I am? That Rika was killed by Takano? Because I keep assuming that Takano faked her death. Because otherwise, I don't really see the logic behind this. Rika was still killed that night by Rule Y. Unless I missed it. Unless they explain it. But as far as I see, it may be possible that I may be right. That was a huge leap forward. Rika knew there were 3 common rules among the worlds, but she could never break any of them. Eventually she gave up, and lost interest in the worlds. That's how I was born. However, she's different now. She learned something valuable from Keiichi Maebara, that the rules can be broken with a strong enough will to fight. If she can break all its 3 rules, Rika Furude will be free from her eternal prison. She doesn't have much time left though. Rika has traveled through many worlds. Her physical lifespan is not a problem, but her mental lifespan is getting shorter. Mentally, she's extremely old. Her soul is starting to turn into something different. In the end, she'll probably lose the ability to experience singular worlds. She's already showing those signs, and eventually her memories from the parallel worlds will mix together, ultimately causing her derangement and the loss of Rika Furude's soul. True enough, I mean, Bender Costello is basically an example of that, but, you know, that's in a supernatural, spiritual sense. Realistically speaking, Rika still going through these loops is basically gonna go through that same thing. Because Ben Castell is basically like a metaphysical, supernatural, like physical representation of Rika's transformation, even if Rika didn't transform fully into Berncastel. The concept of Berncastel has already been created up until this point. So if Rika is gonna go through this like too much, Rika herself truly will become Berncastel fully. Not the spiritual, metaphysical kind that I've known like all these years, but a true one. Then she will disappear. That means that you and I are going to be left in this dark world. The fragments of our memories will gradually disappear, and we will be left alone in the eternal darkness. Eventually, we will die. True enough. I guess that also explains that up to this point, you know, a lot of timelines have passed, but we're only aware of 6 up until this point. 7 if we include this one. I guess this is a sign of memories gradually disappearing, and we only remember a few. Rika Furude is aware of that. She knows that her mental lifespan is getting shorter and shorter. Hanyu is also losing her powers. Hanyu? She can't rewind through years of time like she used to. Her power has decreased so much that she can barely rewind 1 month of time. Who the fuck is... Wait a minute. Is she talking about Oyashiro? The child? This is the first time that I'm seeing that name. Actually, she can only rewind a few weeks. In the next world, she should only have about 2 weeks of time. Oh. She can only rewind a few weeks. She should only have about 2 weeks of time. Okay, so I was sort of right about the timelines. So... holy crap. Okay, so it's... Let me correct myself again. It's not as if these timelines like start ever since Rika's birth / minimum 1979 and then go 1978 and then go until 1983 and then the loop starts again like years ago. No. Apparently Rika went through one timeline from birth up until 1983, still being aware of other timelines, and then afterwards the timelines have become short, like 2 weeks, in similar length to these chapters, before Watanagashi and after Watanagashi. This is very confusing. Let's just continue. Rika Furude is going to try and break all 3 rules in just those 2 weeks. Huh. Jesus, I spent like quite a lot of time talking about this stuff in this. My god. Chapter 5. Minagoroshi. We spent like an hour on that. I felt no gravity in the darkness, and lost all my senses as a result. I banged my head on the floor with a dull thud. Seeing stars behind my eyelids, I curled into a ball while holding my head in pain. had no idea why I was in this situation. But as soon as I heard their voices from the top of the cliff, I realized I must have fallen. Oh, Rika's perspective. Ah, I remember. I was playing behind the shrine with the rest of the club members. I got too excited and started doing something very dangerous. Then the tree branch broke. That's how I fell off the cliff. My body started to ache all over. I remembered how I fell, but I still felt strange for some reason. I couldn't remember what I was doing. No. It was more that I couldn't remember who Rika Furuta was before I fell off the cliff. I heard Hanyu's panicked voice. I looked behind me and saw Hanyu standing there with a scared look on her face. Hi there.
Hanyu. これは一体何事なの？はうはう。リカはみんなと遊んでて崖から転げ落ちたのです。
So, you are the Oyashiro child?
大丈夫なのですか？羽生、そんなことはどうでもいいわ。今日はいつ？昭和何年の何月何日？
I always ask this question first when something like this happens. Jesus. She finally realized that I was asking the same old question.
昭和58年6月なのです。綿流しのお祭りが再来週なのですから、なんてこと。それしか猶予がないってわけ。僕たちの力もこれが精一杯なのです。
Hanyu muttered regretfully. It was the middle of June 1983. If this really was the best she could do, I had no choice. Okay, here's something that I want to bring up here. This is gonna be a bit random, but this is something that I've been thinking for last chapter. There was one tip where we had Keiichi's life described and how they moved into the new house. It was like we also had the father's thoughts on things about the new house, the new life, and at some point he saw two girls on the field, near the house. Both those girls had long hair, and I couldn't really pin down those specific girls, who they were, cause okay, it could have been Mion and Shion, that's for sure. I was also thinking of Rika, but the other girl not so much because Satoko has short hair. So I was thinking, could that be Oyashiro? Physically existing? Well, this girl right over here, Hanyu, has long hair, so maybe that's the second girl. So, would that mean that Oyashiro the child, Hanyu right over here, actually exists? She's not just something in Rika's mind. I gradually started to remember more things.
私がまた昭和58年の6月にいるということは。そうか。また私は殺されたのか。
After Rena surrendered to the police, all the classmates were given checkups at the clinic. I didn't get hurt, So I was sent back home after they determined that I had no injuries. My memories started getting vague from that point on. Okay, all the classmates were given checkups at the clinic. She didn't get hurt. So you're sent back home. After they determined that you had no injuries, you were sent back home. Or at least, as far as you are aware. Okay. That's a good detail to know. A common characteristic of my violent deaths. When my life is taken away violently, the memory before death becomes vague with static. It's like a violently ripped roll of toilet paper. That example should make it easy to understand, even if it's uncouth. That's why I have no clear memory of what happened and how I died that night. I only have vague memories. I think someone covered my mouth with a handkerchief or something, and I passed out. That's about the only thing that I remember, and only vaguely. Yeah, I'm not even sure if it really happened. The only thing I know for sure is that I was attacked on my way home, or possibly after I got there, and that I was murdered slowly. I don't know who killed me or how I was killed. I'm glad that at least I don't remember the horrific ending to my life every time it happens. Because of my experiences, I think I now understand why ghosts wander around this world, not knowing that they died so soon. If it's a death from a long-lasting illness, people tend to remember that they were sick. They can kind of assume that they died after being sick for a long time. But when your memory is violently disrupted like mine, it can get quite confusing. When I first experienced this, I wasn't sure if I was dreaming or not. I even thought that I hit my head hard and lost my memory. I needed to organize things before I get too confused. My name is Rika Furude. People look at me in a special way, but that's not a big deal for me. All I want is a happy life where I can play around with my best friends. I can't remember how long I've been living just for the sake of obtaining that simple happiness. This panicked girl here is named Hanyu. I'm the only one who can see her. Okay, well, a bit transparent, so maybe you're not quite physically here. Maybe you are like some spirit or ghost or only in Rika's mind. That's one. Two, you have shrine outfit. That's one. Third, you have horns. Maybe they are demons. Perhaps you only exist inside my head? At any rate, Hanyu is invisible and can generally only interact with me. It'll be a long story if I try to explain Hanyu's existence, so I won't be doing that right now. Besides, I don't even know how I should talk about her. She's been there since I was born, and her existence is a natural thing for me. Since you were born as a baby, right? I saw everyone running up the gravel road toward me. They are my important and lovable best friends. Our group's active, boisterous, and we get serious about doing stupid things. I am never bored when I'm around them, and I love them very much.
Rika-chan, 大丈夫? 捻挫とかしてない? どこ打ったの? おじさんに見せてみて。ありがとうなのです。頭に単コブができただけなのですよ。
I think all I got was a bump at least. My injury wasn't as serious as everyone thought.
頭を打った時はその場では大丈夫でも油断がなりませんでしたよ。
それもそうだな。念には念で監督に診察してもらった方がいいかもしれないな。
レナもそれがいいと思うな。どうしよう、監督を呼んでくる？
そうだね。近くの家で電話を借りて監督を呼んでみるよ。
そこまでしなくても大丈夫なのですよ。この通りピンピンしてますのです。ニパー。ダメですわよりか。万が一ということがありましたよ。
Satoko warned me with a stern voice. He really wasn't a big deal, but I decided not to nod since Satoko was trying to be generous. She wasn't trying to boss me around or anything. She was only saying that because of how much she cares. I've seen it before in the many different lives that I've been through. I have no doubt that she's really concerned about me. It's not just Satoko. Mion, Rena, and Keiichi are the same. They're all so nice to me, and they truly do care. Mion left to look for her phone. Rena also left with a towel, looking for the water tap. Satoko remained nearby, taking care of me with a worried face. And Hanyu was just standing there, still wearing a panicked look. Keiichi seemed to be panicked too, but he was trying not to show it. He was standing by me, wearing a calm expression.
大丈夫か？
大丈夫なのですよ。もう全然痛くないのです。
なら不幸中の幸いだったよな。よかったよかった。
I wouldn't feel anything special about his words if this was a while ago. But at the moment when Rena took over the classroom, when she heard Mion, Keiichi tried his best to save Rena. Even so, he was more reliable than I ever imagined from his normal behavior. He's usually an insensitive guy who hurts other people's feelings without noticing. But that's not his true self. He has a secret side. He is willing to sacrifice himself for other people. I was just observing that not too long ago. That's why I can honestly feel his generosity now. Now that I think about it, Keiichi regained a memory from another world, the previous time around. Is it possible that he carries that memory in this world too? If that's the case, I have some hope. Hanyu and I are totally powerless. Hanyu is only like heir to everyone but me, and I'm just a little girl. There's only so much that we can do ourselves. But Keiichi is different. He changed the fate that I had once resigned myself to. He's somebody who may have the power to take me to my unseen future. If I can get Keiichi to understand me, he could be my hero. Yep, for sure. Perhaps I'm actually not expecting that much out of him. I just want someone to understand my struggle of being stuck in this maze.
Keiichi?
I spoke to him slowly. It had been a while since I felt so nervous. I hadn't felt this way since I started my endless life in 1983. As a witch, I normally would know what his response would be before even talking to him.